incident, it is necessary to evacuate the area. Please leave
go and get your guys, go and get them.
by the nearest exit.
We need some help, yeah.
There aren't many citizens, if any, who have researched and investigated the Manchester Arena incident more than I have. In my years of investigation, I did not find any evidence to show that a real bomb was used. But I did find video and photographic evidence which shows beyond doubt that there was no bomb. This court has refused consistently and repeatedly to examine fully any primary evidence from the Manchester incident, which I put forward in my defence. It has also refused my applications to obtain further evidence, which we know exists and would be easy for a court to obtain. I contend, therefore, that this was not a fair trial. And
Mr. Hall, the judge called your narrative preposterous and untrue. Would you like to apologise to the victims of the Manchester Arena attack?
In this episode, I'm going to pause and take stock. The date today is the 4th of March 2025, which is 7 years and 10 months since the night of the Manchester Arena incident, and only now is the establishment's game being revealed through the Hibbert v Hall trial. To quote Ian Davis from the introduction to his book, The Manchester Attack, an Independent Investigation, Hall's own story has now become intertwined with the official narrative, though not because Hall chose to insert himself into the state's account. The persecution of Richard D. Hall is part of the evidence we must consider if we genuinely want to understand what happened. Anyone who has watched a cat toying with a mouse can see what's going on here. They want to send the message that, from now on, any one of us could be that unlucky mouse, a plaything for the establishment. They also want us to believe that whether, like me, you can't fault a single word of Richard D. Hall's post-trial statement, or whether you vehemently dispute it, we are all now well and truly confined to the same boat. This press summary about the case was released to the world's media via the judiciary.uk website on the 24th of October 2024. Who are the judiciary? The judiciary is made up of judges, magistrates, tribunal members and coroners. Together they uphold the rule of law. To quote from this document, this case contains a false narrative published by the defendant, an independent journalist and broadcaster, that the Manchester Arena attack was an elaborate hoax, carefully planned by elements within the state and involving ordinary citizens, including the claimants, in the deception as crisis actors, in which no one was injured or died. The court accepted the defendant's evidence that he did not subjectively know that his course of conduct amounted to harassment, but the court concluded that the claimant should have known that his course of conduct amounted to harassment because a reasonable person with the same information that he had had would have known it would have a harassing effect on the claimants. So the message they want us to hear and absorb is that any one of us could be subjected to the same lawfare treatment unless we are able to accurately predict the opinion of a hypothetical, quote, reasonable person about whether the material we present could have a, quote, harassing effect on the people concerned. And if that's true for the Manchester incident, it will be true for any other state narrative involving ordinary citizens. Little wonder that so many of the once resolute independent news producers are now running scared of venturing onto this ground. Yes, I'm looking at you, UK column. Here they are on the 23rd of May 2017, the day after the night of the bank.
Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 23rd of May 2017, after 1 o'clock. Many apologies, few technical problems there. Whether or not it was the Russians, we don't know, but we're delighted to be with you this morning, or this afternoon, very sorry. And of course, we've got some major events unfolding in the UK.
Okay, let's get straight on with it then. And of course, the picture of the day, the events in Manchester. What can we say about it, Brian? Already lots of questions to be asked, but I suppose the biggest part of this is the political capital which is being drawn from it. It is incredible. We have suspended the campaigning for the general election. Theresa May saying that on one hand, we're not going to let terrorism win. On the other hand, we suspend our democratic process.
In order to fight terrorism.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I've got to say that I only learnt about this fairly early this morning. I was looking at general news over the internet. I then started to come across the BBC reports. And what absolutely fascinated me was the type of statements that were appearing on the BBC updated news. So we had the chief of police saying it was one man. I found that very interesting. How did he possibly know that? And then as I watched that report updated to say it was now one man and a network of people. But there was no evidence to support anything around that statement. And I wonder why the chief constable would be conducting an investigation, but making these statements that apparently we knew it, but we didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, so
confusion at best,
absolutely,
I think.
Yes. But of course, we have all kinds of useful information appearing in the mainstream media at the moment.
We do, yeah. I just picked up on this. This was being tweeted out, but I thought it was a useful image which shows the basic layout. And of course, the important thing to take on board, it was the foyer area where we're told an explosion took place. But I find it interesting, Mike, that when an explosion, just hold that on screen for a second,
sure.
When an explosion takes place, a suicide bomber in the Middle East, then the BBC, the mainstream media, they want to show us the graphic pictures of the bodies, they want to show us the devastation. But so far we have seen no video evidence of the bomb going up. All we're able to see are clips of people's phones, which in fact capture the sound of an explosion. And I find this very interesting because, of course, the foyer of a major public venue, we can expect to be covered with CCTV from numerous angles. Big venue like this is going to be heavily covered by CCTV, and yet we have no actual footage of this bomb going off. And I find this very strange. We don't know exactly what happened, but personally I find this very strange that there's no video footage of the actual explosion, and there's certainly no video footage of the bodies and general carnage. Now, I'm not asking this question out of a sense of some macabre interest. I'm asking this question by the fact that when we have people in the Middle East who are blown up and seriously injured, then what is the duty of the BBC? It's to get in there and get the pictures of that carnage. But in Manchester, we've got a bomb, we've got 22 people killed. How many others were maimed, we don't know.
Well,
but
the last count was 57.
57, thank you. But we have no video evidence. Very, very curious.
So in 2017, Brian Gerrish was unafraid to question the veracity of the state's narrative on the Manchester bomb. Let's see how that compares to November 2024, with additional insightful commentary by Ian Davis.
It's such a juggling act, isn't it, to decide, what we talk about and how we talk about it. And there's so much that all of us are constantly thinking we've got to get more evidence out. it's a difficult balancing act.
If you are a British news organisation, it is not difficult to understand that convincing evidence of a UK state-orchestrated hoaxed false flag terrorist attack, which effectively constitutes the worst ever political scandal in British history, is a priority story worth running. While we might expect the legacy media to cover up the evidence on behalf of the establishment, as they have, one would think the independent media would be all over it.
And I can be careful because there's still a bit more detail around this case I need to know. But I think I'm correct in saying that one of the things that changed the dynamics of the case is that Richard D. Hall was not allowed to put in certain information in order to form his own defence in challenging what the UK government said about the Manchester Arena bombings.
There is simply no need for any doubt. It is an absolute certainty that Hall was barred from submitting the evidence of the Manchester hoax to the High Court. The High Court blankly declared that this was not evidence and refused to acknowledge its existence. It is equally clear that this effectively destroyed any chance he had of properly defending himself. UK Column's hesitancy seems inexplicable in light of the fact that they have reported these obvious truths themselves.
And her response appears to be that well, we've had a tribunal and the government's decided what the truth is. Therefore, you can't put anything in which would be over and above the truth specified by the UK government. Maybe I'm not being quite fair on her, but I think this is the gist of it.
There is nothing unfair about this observation. It is entirely accurate.
And I find this unbelievably frightening that we're now seeing, well, we've seen corruption in courts before, not suggesting she was running a corrupt court, of course, but basically if you're simply able to dismiss evidence on the basis the government says.
Brian finds it unbelievably frightening that evidence is being dismissed on the basis that government says. So it looks to me like the big boy intimidation is working on UK Column, and they are not the only ones. These independent players know full well that from now on, anyone who exposes evidence that runs counter to the state's official narrative runs the risk of triggering an establishment-backed lawfare case against them. And as the craven flee the field, the state is emboldened in its operation to disappear all of the troublesome evidence that puts a spanner in the spokes of the state narrative. Here's a run-through of the material that's been removed or deliberately been made inaccessible since I started investigating the Manchester Arena incident a year ago. First to go was the Manchester Arena Inquiry website. This was the site that was set up for the inquiry, where all the transcripts and evidence generated by the inquiry was made available for the public to access. Anyone with even a passing interest in what transpired at the inquiry would easily come across this site and all its contents via any of the search engines. Not only that, but keywords such as the name of a participant would bring up specific PDF documents such as transcripts and deeply buried pieces of evidence in the list of returns. For instance, just typing the name Ruth Morell into Google returned 2 very useful documents from the mountain of evidence. This was clearly far too useful a resource, and so the website and all its documents were scrubbed clean from the internet and, for all practical purposes, the material put beyond use. To pay lip service to the public access requirement of the statutory inquiry, the material has been transferred to the UK Government Web Archive, where it is, in theory, still accessible, but I defy anyone to locate it by the normal search engine routes. Typing Manchester Arena Inquiry into a search engine now brings up a sparse gov.uk page as the first return. This offers nothing more than links to the inquiry reports, which I'll come back to later. A sharp-eyed and motivated researcher may spot the link which says, quote, read about the inquiry on the National Archives website and feel encouraged. But as I've explained before, the Home Office web team has linked this to the Inquest archive rather than the Inquiry archive. After clicking a few links and finding a baffling selection of irrelevant documents, most people would likely shrug and give up at this point, but a few might go back to the index page and notice the promising looking URL here. It's not an active link, so they would have to copy and paste it into a browser. And, well, no surprises when it returns an error. Only the most tenacious of investigators might see the browse A to Z of archived websites and finally claim their prize.
Plans were on display.
On display? I eventually had to go down to the cellar.
That's the display department.
With a torch.
The lights are probably gone.
So had the stairs.
But you did see the notice, didn't you?
Oh, yes. It was on display in the bottom of a locked filing cabinet stuck in a disused lavatory with a sign outside the door saying, beware of the leopard.
As an aside, I'm just going to show you this policy paper that was published by the Home Office. I found it when I was looking for the costs of the inquiry. And this is a breakdown of the costs of terrorist attacks, and it's specifically about the ones that took place in 2017. So that includes the Manchester Arena attack. And you can see from this figure 1 bar chart that the Manchester Arena attack is way out in front of the others that happened that year. And further down there's this table which gives a breakdown of the costs. The Manchester Arena column is here, and the inquiry, according to this Home Office estimate, cost £35.63 million. I'll show you in a minute what you got for that money, but there are a few other things on here that caught my attention. The inquest cost for the Manchester Arena incident is listed at £3.54 million. And as David Hughes has pointed out, you'd be hard pressed to see what you got for your money there. This row lists property damage, and as you can see for the Manchester Arena incident, it was estimated at £2.75 million. All of the other incidents have a figure of 0. Now, as many researchers have pointed out, from the primary evidence, it's difficult to see any damage to the city room where the bomb happened. So, how is this figure £2.75 million? Further down the report, there's a short paragraph about how this cost was estimated, and it says, quote, there is a cost of property damage resulting from the Manchester Arena attack. Due to a lack of available data as to the cost of this damage to property, insurance claims to Pool Reinsurance Company Limited and their members have been used as a proxy. This figure has been provided directly by Pool Reinsurance Company Limited. The cost of property damage is estimated to be £2.8 million for Manchester Arena. And there's one more cost that caught my attention from this table, and it's this one, Operation Tempera, which for Manchester Arena was estimated at £1.71 million. So what is Operation Tempera? This was the first I'd heard of it. Again, there's a little bit of information further down in the report. So what it says is, quote, for the Manchester Arena and Parsons Green attack, there is a cost of activating Operation Tempera. This is the deployment of troops to support and free up police officers in key locations following a rise in the threat from severe to critical. A bespoke estimate for the Manchester Arena attack has been provided by the Ministry of Defence based on the number of troops deployed and the duration for which Operation Tempera was enacted, 7 days. These costs include personnel costs, accommodation and catering, transport and miscellaneous costs. And the Home Office in the media blog has kindly provided this Operation Tempera fact sheet, which gives us a bit more detail. So here it says that, quote, Operation Tempera is a joint contingency operation to provide military support to the police in extreme national emergency circumstances, such as surge of support from a major domestic terrorist attack or threat. Defence personnel will always be deployed alongside and operate under the command of armed police officers. How did Tempera start? Following the attacks in Paris in January 2015, the Prime Minister asked the Home Secretary to work with the police and the Defence Secretary to ensure that the police were able to call upon significant support from the UK military in the event of a similar incident occurring in the UK. Operation Tempera was used for the first time in May 2017 following the Manchester Arena bombing, and again in the wake of the Parsons Green manhunt in September 2017. Who remembers that? And there's a little bit here about the scale of Tempera. It says that Operation Tempera has about 1,500 personnel held at heightened readiness for specific roles to support armed police. Expansion beyond this figure could be requested by police, and a scaled response will be generated by the Ministry of Defence. And so the UK public purse shelled out on the inquiry, and I just thought I'd have a quick look to see what they got for the money. And it amounts to this one web page published by the Home Office. That's it. So I'll go through this page and it won't take long. Reading the text, it simply says Manchester Arena Inquiry Reports. This collection page brings together reports published by the Manchester Arena Inquiry. The Manchester Arena Inquiry, a statutory public inquiry, was established by the then Home Secretary in 2019 to investigate the deaths of the victims of the attack on the arena on the 22nd of May 2017. It is chaired by the Honourable Sir John Saunders. And that's the extent of what they're going to tell you about the Manchester Arena Inquiry. Of course, there's this link here which I showed you earlier on and which leads you down a false trail to the wrong archive in the National Archives website. There are no contact details such as an email address. The only way to contact anyone is this box at the bottom which says, is this page useful, yes or no, and report a problem with this page. Now I've done this and I did a video on it and it got me nowhere. Back to the reports, and each one of these does indeed lead to a downloadable PDF version of each report. So that's volume 1. Volume 2 is in 2 parts. Volume 3 is about radicalisation and preventability. Now there's only one volume published here, but what it doesn't tell you is that there were other volumes published that weren't released to the public. And you wouldn't know that unless you start reading the report, because it does actually mention it in the introduction. Sir John Saunders writes this: Volume 3 is the final volume of my report. It comprises this document, which I will refer to as Volume 3 Open, along with Volume 3 Closed, which contains material that will be damaging to national security if it were to become public. As a consequence, Volume 3 Closed will have a limited readership. Going back to the reports page, I'll give you an example of what you might want to find out from one of these reports. I'm looking at the emergency response report, which was volume 2, so I'll open it. As you can see, it opens quite easily as a PDF, and there are 716 pages to this report. But let's say, for instance, you want to look at the evidence of Patrick Ennis. So you could do that by searching in the document. And it brings up 32 references to Patrick Ennis. So I'll just run through some of these. Now in this one here, it talks about his arrival at the Victoria Exchange Complex, and it mentions a couple of footnotes. So this one here is number 18, and that refers to these notes down here. Number 18 has an inquiry reference number attached to it, and it is a transcription. So that looks really interesting. So let's see what happens when we click on that. No surprise, it brings up an error, and that's because it's linking to the Manchester Arena Inquiry.org.uk website, which has been scrubbed from the internet. None of these documents are available, and there's no indication anywhere which tells you how to find them. One final thought about these reports. I did wonder along the way whether I could get hold of a print copy of any of these, and there is a link here which says order a copy, and it takes you to this page here, how to buy print copies of official documents. So I'll click on this link here, buy a print copy, and it takes you to this page, which tells you that HM Government does not produce printed copies of official documents for sale. If you wish to obtain a professionally printed copy of an official document, contact your preferred supplier with details of the document you wish to purchase for further information on costs, timelines and delivery. And there's a link to Dandy Booksellers Limited, which is the public information online website. And here it is. Indeed, this site does supply printed versions of the report, but they're really pricey. This is volume 3 and it's £45.50. So if you want the whole set, I've totted it up and it comes to more than £200. And I can't help thinking that they must have had a print run of quite a lot, and it might be fairly easy for them to send out copies to members of the public who ask for them. I mean, there can't be that many people asking for this report, but no, they're not going to be as helpful as that. Remember, this is a public inquiry commissioned for the public, heard in public, and paid for with public money. The least they can do is rectify these problems to give us, the public, access to the material. The next valuable resource to disappear was the entire back catalogue of films and documents of the Manchester Arena incident from the Rich Planet TV website. This is a bitter blow which should concern anyone with even a passing interest in State Fabricated Events. Also removed from Rich Planet TV are the videos of UK Critical Thinker, several books from the shop, and all the documents relating to the Hibbert v Hall trial. The latter is particularly aggravating since Richard paid several £1000s from money donated by supporters for the trial transcripts. Just to be clear, I am in no way criticising Richard for taking this action. He has been well and truly strong-armed into submission by the High Court of Justice and been given no choice, as he explains here.
I fully refute the judgment that my actions as a journalist reporting on an important investigation amounted to harassment, which is why I have decided to appeal. As a result of this judgment, I am now under an injunction, which means that if I make public certain honestly held, evidence-based opinions, I could face a prison sentence without access to a jury. There is also an order to pay £279,000 in damages and costs. Now, of course, I am appealing against the decision, and an appeal was submitted to the appeal court in December 24, in which we have put forward 8 grounds of appeal against the judgment. I am now waiting to hear back from the appeal court.
On the plus side, the CCTV image viewer is still up and running on the Rich Planet TV website. I'll show you where it is. On the home page, if you scroll down to Analysis and Campaigns, it's the last one in the list, Manchester CCTV. So it's all there for you to use as you want. Next to disappear were 4 of my own videos from Odyssey. This is a bit of a weird one. With no warnings or messages at all from Odyssey, I didn't realise they'd gone. Logging into my account, they are all still present and correct. Nothing at all seems amiss. But for all other UK residents, these 4 videos have simply vanished. Now, because I still have the URL addresses, I've been able to discover the reason for their removal. Content unavailable. Blocked by order of UK Counter-Terrorism Internet Referral Unit. It appears this restriction only applies to the UK because the videos in question are still available to residents in other countries. I have no explanation or theory about why these 4 videos appear to have been targeted by the UK Counter-Terrorism Internet Referral Unit, or why they haven't been removed from my other accounts on YouTube and Substack. If anyone has any ideas, I'd be interested to hear them. Moving on, the Manchester Arena Inquiry YouTube channel was, until very recently, the most useful, readily available resource from the official Saunders inquiry. It was easy to find by the public via search engines, and it gave access to several hundred hours of witness testimony. But a couple of weeks ago, this too was deleted. Now, I happen to know that all of the content from that channel is available on the UK Government Web Archive, but of course there is no helpful link to it from the defunct YouTube page, nor anywhere else for that matter, so the general public has no way of finding it.
Hey, this is terrific! They're trying to kill us! You know what that means?
Yes, we're going to die.
Yeah! No, maybe. Look, it means there's something down there they don't want us to have. And if they don't want us to have it that badly, then I want to have it even worse!
Here are my final thoughts on all this. It strikes me that the routine disappearance of lawful and valuable content, particularly over the past 5 years, has become so accepted that it's seen as hardly worth mentioning. But I do think it matters, not least because so many of the links I and other Manchester Arena researchers have so diligently included in articles are no longer working. And so I've decided to set up a page on my Substack and on my own website with links to important resources and documents, and I'm going to at least endeavour to keep it maintained. I will make sure that access to the Saunders Inquiry Archive material is on there, including the recordings of witness testimony which has been scrubbed from YouTube. It will take me a while to set this up, but I'll let you know when it's done. Thank you for watching.